If you search, why is it so hard to get disability benefits, you turn up a lot of frustration and very few answers. And those frustrations are warranted. Since 2000, the number of disability applicants has gone up 31%, and the number of initial approvals has gone down. And the rising application trend doesn't seem like it's ever going to reverse. The SSA predicts that 1 in 4 of today's 20-year-olds will be eligible for disability benefits in their lifetime. So it benefits us all to understand Social Security disability benefits and to truly understand why our benefit system feels so out of reach for so many Americans. It helps to know the history of disability payments in the US. When we look at the broader context, we see that the reach of Social Security disability is actually improving and that there are reasons for optimism. So stick around to the end. Since the United States' founding, there has always been some type of Social Security program. And since the United States' founding, there has always been opposition to it. When colonists arrived from England, they brought with them the custom of poor laws, a local taxation to support those in need. Now, decisions on who received the benefit was at the discretion of town elders, and the authorities made it purposefully unpleasant to get any sort of aid. Those receiving relief could lose their personal property, the right to vote, the right to move, and in some cases were required to wear a large P on their clothing to announce their status. Flash forward to the Industrial Revolution, when American society started undergoing massive changes. Between 1890 and 1930, the percentage of Americans living in cities doubled. That meant people moved away from their extended family units, which would normally be a safety net in times of hardship or illness. Americans in cities were also more likely to experience economic uncertainty. Your livelihood was no longer tied to your family's farm, it was tied to an employer who could fire you or to a business that could go under. So when the Great Depression hit and our newly urban industrial economy destabilized, it was a powder keg for social welfare programs. Programs like Upton Sinclair's EPIC scheme, California's Ham and Eggs movement, Francis E. Townsend's Townsend Plan, and Huey Long's Share Our Wealth program built massive support across the country throughout the 1930s. These were radical calls for change, demanding financial support for the sick, the elderly, and those otherwise out of work. So after years of pressure, the government made creating a social insurance policy a priority, which brings us to the first reason why it feels so hard to get disability benefits today. 1. Disability benefits were designed to be insurance, not welfare or charity. When state-led Social Security was developed in the US, it was designed to be a reasonable, practical alternative to more radical calls for action. Or, as Teddy Roosevelt described it, we must protect the crushable elements at the base of our present industrial structure. We pledge ourselves to work unceasingly for the protection of home life against the hazards of sickness, irregular employment, and old age through the adoption of a system of social insurance. Social insurance was already established in 34 countries by the time the US adopted it in 1935, with Germany having adopted a program as early as 1889. And as a social insurance program, Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI, had tension baked into its very design. It's insurance which requires pooling resources to protect participants against economic risk. And it's a social program, which means it serves a broader humanitarian goal than pure profit. But designing our disability program around an insurance principle pushes the SSA to act like an insurance company. And like all insurance companies, it only works if it has more money coming in than it has being paid out. In 2022, the SSA had paid out $1.2 trillion in benefits and only took in $1.1 billion in payroll taxes. And that poses a real problem, which is why you've probably read the headlines warning about the end of Social Security, that it'll run out of funds by 2030 unless we intervene now. The truth is more complicated. The SSA has reserves, and our Social Security programs don't seem to be heading towards elimination anytime soon. But this reminds us that there are limits to our government's ability to pay the people who qualify for these programs. Insurance programs only benefit those who pay into them, meaning if you've never had the capacity to pay in, you'll likely never have the benefit of a payout. That means you were always too sick to work and pay Social Security taxes, or were too sick to work much SSDI will usually be out of reach for you. Nearly 20 years after establishing SSDI, the government acknowledged these clear gaps and created an additional program called SSI, or Supplemental Security Income. SSI, which is more need-based than SSDI, copies SSDI's medical requirements and is administered by the same agency. But this program has fewer recipients, generally lower payouts, and complex income-based eligibility requirements. That's because, as the name implies, SSI was originally designed to supplement Social Security income and primarily served to supplement payments for retired adults. Which brings the second reason it feels really hard to get disability benefits. 2. Social Security was designed for the elderly, not for the disabled population. Early proposals for Social Security called for supporting a wide range of economic needs, protection for the elderly, the unemployed, and those with disabilities. But when Social Security was finally approved in 1935, only retirement benefits were included. Disability benefits were gradually added in waves. In 1954, the government implemented a disability freeze. This provided no benefits in and of itself, but froze your retirement benefits while you weren't working. Basically, you wouldn't lose Social Security benefits access even if you couldn't pay in further, as long as the reason you weren't paying in was a disability. In 1956, actual disability benefit payments were extended to workers over age 50, and it wasn't until 1960 that people under age 50 could be eligible. This focus on the aged population has a real impact on the way the program was administered, and has real impact on how we think about disability benefits today. 75% of disability recipients are between the ages of 50 and 64, and older applicants have massive advantages when applying for the program.
There's a 5-step process to determining if someone gets disability benefits. And the 5th step is proving that you are not able to perform any work in the national economy, not just your past work. If you're 50 and over, then SSA rules will often allow for you to establish step 5 without having a vocational expert testify at your hearing. If you are 49 and under, however, you don't have access to this loophole. And so you're more likely to have to go to a hearing in order to have your case heard, because the vocational expert will need to testify to step 5, whether or not you can perform work in the national economy. And that's sort of an additional negative. Not only do you have to wait and go to a hearing, but often vocational experts can be quite hostile or unforgiving with claimants.
This focus on age shapes the kinds of conditions the government considers to be disabling. If you look at who's qualifying for benefits, the obvious outlier is applicants with musculoskeletal pain, back pain, knee pain, lack of mobility, conditions most common in older populations. From a 2000 Committee on Ways and Means statement, in its formative years between 1956 and 1960, SSDI paid benefits only to workers who were 50 years of age or older. That meant the caseload contained a disproportionate number of people with impairments that affected older individuals, such as heart disease and arthritis, rather than people with impairments or conditions that affected younger individuals, such as mental disorders. And that brings us to the third reason why it feels so difficult to get disability benefits. Number 3. The SSA relies on outdated rules about the nature of work and health. Qualifying for Social Security disability comes down to 2 key things: the severity of your medical condition and how that impacts your ability to work. Since the 1950s, our understanding of both health and work have shifted dramatically, and the Social Security Administration has been slow to keep up, until recently. This is an area where there have been significant strides that not many Americans know about. One major example is mental health, the second most common condition type disability applicants report. Early into the development of disability insurance, the government was skeptical about including mental health conditions as a qualifying impairment. At the time, policymakers tended to think of the system for caring for people with mental illness, who occupied the majority of beds in the nation's hospitals, as a state responsibility. This suspicion of mental illness as a basis for disability benefits persisted in the program that was passed in 1956. In the 1980s, serious efforts were made to correct this oversight. In 1983, a report from GAO found that the SSA's evaluation process for mental impairments was really flawed, Applicants were being evaluated by doctors without psychiatric training and were being rejected based on the very brief descriptions of only rudimentary daily activities, such as watching television, fixing basic meals. So in 1984, for the first time, doctors evaluating mental impairments were required to be specialists in psychiatry, and significant changes were made to what the agency considered significantly disabling in the case of mental illness.
I worked with a client for a really long time. When she came to us, we actually thought she had a physical case due to some pelvic reconstruction surgery, started digging into her records. They were very limited, definitely not enough recent records to get her approved for the physical condition, but I kept seeing this theme of really inappropriate behavior with healthcare providers that was indicative of mental health concerns. And we'd built a relationship and I spoke with her about them. And over the course of some time, we were able to get her connected with several mental health providers who created such strong records detailing the very severe limitations she experienced. She was basically stuck at home 100% of the time, unable to communicate effectively, even to get medical treatment without a lot of third-party support. Her records ended up being so strong by the end that she was approved on the record by a judge solely for her mental health condition, which was borderline personality disorder.
Mental health conditions aren't the only condition types that the SSA has reconsidered. There have been real strides in how the agency evaluates severe diagnoses. In 2008, the SSA created the Compassionate Allowances Program to quickly identify and approve benefits for people with the most severe disabilities, expediting the process for over 900,000 Americans. 11 more conditions were added to this list in 2024. The agency tries to be responsive to new disabling conditions, including long COVID, which they're working to codify the medical criteria for. The other thing that's historically made it very hard for Americans to get benefits is how the SSA evaluates workability. When the government evaluates your benefit eligibility, they think about your work history a few different ways. First, they look at whether you could do the type of work you've done in the past, or past relevant work. Then, they evaluate whether you could feasibly retrain and do a different type of job that could accommodate your limitations. In 2024, the way they think about both types of work has changed in ways that make a real difference for applicants. When evaluating past relevant work, the government used to consider your work history over the last 15 years. If you trained in a field and you could do work you were trained on 15 years ago, you wouldn't qualify for benefits. In April of 2024, this rule changed from 15 years to 5 years. Applicants no longer have to rigidly prove they can't do work they trained in over a decade ago. When evaluating new work you could retrain to do, the government has historically looked to something called the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, or the DOT. But this jobs list hadn't been revised or updated since 1974. Applicants were forced to prove that they couldn't hold a job as a silverware wrapper or a ticket taker, jobs that haven't existed in the national economy for decades. In June of 2024, the SSA updated that list, cutting 114 jobs that no longer meaningfully exist. These changes are huge. Nearly 46% of applicants who were medically denied disability were denied because the government determined they could work a past job or a DOT-listed job. But there's still one more reason it feels hard to get disability benefits. 4, the SSA's lack of resourcing. Low approval rates aren't the only reason disability benefits feel so out of reach for so many Americans. Wait times and application complexity are the others. Some Americans try to go back to work because they can't afford to wait while their application decision drags out. Others don't bother applying, fearing the wait. Departmental resourcing is a key reason for this. The SSA's operating budget has been shrinking since 2010, and the gulf between SSA staffing and Social Security beneficiaries has widened. In 2023, administrative staff approached historic lows, while benefit payouts hit an all-time high. This has been felt at every level. Hearing judges are making mistakes, citing heavy caseloads. When these decisions get appealed, 60% of them get overturned. And the reports from caseworkers at the SSA are harrowing. It's no wonder the Social Security Administration ranks as the worst federal agency for employee satisfaction. The end result is trying. applicants experience long wait times and frequent errors.
SSA is a massively under-resourced and under-trained black box. It is nearly impossible to get a hold of people at the SSA, even if you're an attorney. It requires a lot of tenacity, a lot of follow-up calls, and often just finding the right person. Many of the frontline agents are overworked, they're very understaffed, and they're very undereducated in the basics of their job. We have frontline SSA agents giving clients or potential clients not just wrong information, but harmfully wrong information. We've had SSA agents withdraw a client's claim without their consent. And we're attorneys, and so we can fix those things. We know the right people to reach out to. We actually work with a lot of congressional offices around the country to make things right when SSA can't make them right. SSA has gotten somewhat better at providing attorneys and clients with access to documents concerning the disability portion of their claim, but we have almost no insight at all into the technical portions, which concern eligibility, claim processing, whether someone is actually, regardless of whether or not they're medically disabled, whether they meet the technical work credit and sometimes income and asset requirements to access these programs. We have no visibility into that at all, which can be really frustrating.
But here too, there's reason for hope. Large amounts of the current SSA budget for disability benefits are being allocated towards monitoring benefit recipients, ensuring payment amounts are correct. The Senate recently held a hearing on SSI specifically, in which Elizabeth Warren probed into the costs of these monitoring efforts.
SSI is supposed to keep Americans with disabilities out of poverty, but it offers below poverty level support. It punishes people for working, and it punishes recipients for savings, all while the Social Security Administration is spending big dollars in order to administer this system.
The Associate Commissioner from the SSA, Susan B. Wilschke, noted that while SSI payouts make up 4 to 5% of benefit outlays, they take up a third of the administrative budget. That's why, in 2024, there have been a relative flurry of reforms designed to modernize or improve the efficiency of the SSA. Service can improve and errors can be reduced just by streamlining how applicants are screened and paid. And the laws we mentioned earlier that added new medical conditions that automatically qualify and that change the past relevant work rules, those are great for applicants. But they're also great for the overburdened admin workers. The administration has also changed the way they calculate rental income, food cost income, handle overpayments, and evaluate household need. Most significantly, they're releasing a new online application process for SSI applicants, which could be ready as early as next year. For the first time in years, wait times have been trending down at every stage of the process, from phone call wait times to scheduled disability hearings.
I think things have improved slightly, and there's certainly a lot of indications from Martin O'Malley that he cares very deeply about turning the ship around and making this a functioning agency. Some positives: we now have access to a spreadsheet that is mostly correct, that updates us on where our clients' claims are at and when they've been closed, so that we can learn more quickly when claims have been approved or denied and appeal them more quickly. They have revamped the electronic records portal a little bit so that it is easier to use and access. There's been some helpful modifications regarding vocational expert testimony that's generally favorable to clients, such as removing the use of 10 very outdated jobs in the DOT that some vocational experts return to again and again and require a higher burden of evidence to using other jobs in the DOT. That said, on a day-to-day basis, we have not seen a massive improvement. It is still taking several months at minimum to get initials decided, and there's a lot of inefficient back and forth with the SSA while we're doing that. So I do look forward to more efficiency, but I can't with a straight face say that it's there when we're still fighting with the SSA over the use of electronic signatures in the year 2024.
5, the future of Social Security.
So I think we've all been talking about the importance of making changes here. I'm working with Senator Brown and others on this committee to pass the SSI Restoration Act, which would raise the benefit rate and help fix these outdated rules.
We're a far cry from the Social Security Disability Program that started in the 1950s. Originally an insurance program designed only for a small segment of Americans, the program has expanded in its reach to process nearly 2 million applications a year. The odds are good that disability benefits will provide you or someone you care for with financial protection someday. So what can you do to make the process easier? You can call your representative to support common sense Social Security legislation. That'll expand benefits or make them more efficient to administer. And if Social Security disability is the right option for you or a loved one, you could seek legal help.
I have clients who come to us who've been in purgatory for 18 months and they're very frustrated, understandably. And I just wish that they had come to me sooner. And we just are able to move them along a lot faster. We understand SSA's patterns. We speak to these offices every single day. We know what they're looking for. We can build relationships with the examiners in a way that clients who are often deep in medical treatments and really need to be focused on that don't have the capacity to do. So our goal is always to get their benefits as quickly as possible.
Even with recent reforms, getting approved for disability can be trying. At Atticus, we've advised over 250,000 Americans on their disability benefit options. And we can help you too. Connect with one of our client advocates for obligation-free disability advice.